Welcome back, everybody, to the Aurora Show. And we're going to start with the archetypal series. I did the first video just kind of explaining, I've always loved archetypal astrology. I think that that's really the aspect of astrology that I love is, because there are all of these different systems of astrology, right? We can look at archetypal, medical astrology, evolutionary astrology, Western tropical, Vedic, sidereal, Hellenistic astrology. There's all these like different systems, right? And to me, archetypally just kind of boils everything down, right? Because I know there's a lot of discourse in astrology about like which system is the most accurate. Is there one that's right and wrong? Obviously, we know that the 13 zodiac signs, I think we will eventually move into. Right now, we just don't have a way to really chart those, but that's the system we definitely want to move into. And of course, like looking at Vedic, looking at sidereal astrology, there's so many different lenses to look through. So to me, obviously, I've always really practiced Western tropical astrology. And so I focus more on archetypes, right? It's like, we can argue about what constellation a planet is really in at the moment. We can have that discussion. And I think there's a way to look at all systems and get different layers of the truth. But when we look at archetypes, those will always be true, right? There's always going to be truth to archetypes because they are symbolic. It's a blueprint, it's a template, right? And those are going to stay pretty consistent. Now, I have talked a lot about how I think that astrology is evolving, right? I think the archetypes are evolving. Like just, for instance, like when we name planets, astronomers, the ones who discover the planets, tend to name them. And that does bring a certain archetype into the collective, right? And a lot of these names, right, that we have are based on old Greek, Roman gods, myths and lores, right? And so a lot of the archetypes that we have consciously or unconsciously brought into the collective, right? Like just as a main example, the most recent planetary discovery, which was Pluto, 1930, got demoted 2006. Anywho, that was actually the only planet to be named by popular vote versus just them choosing it. And of course, Pluto is the lord of the underworld. So that is what we've got for the past 100 years was the underworld, right? So whether we've consciously or unconsciously brought some of these archetypes in by the way we name planets, they're all evolving. They're all, just as we are activating new archetypes, we are evolving our archetypes, so are the cosmos, right? A lot of these myth, lore, legend stories are played out. They are part of the old human narrative and we're entering a new one. So I think that as we talk about archetypes, we have to allow archetypes to evolve, just as we need to allow people to evolve. We don't want to hold ourselves in the past. We want to be able to grow. We want to be able to change, integrate new aspects of self, try new things. Like this is where we have to kind of lean into the idea that our blueprint is changing and evolving, right? And again, I'm looking at the core archetypes of the chart and how those are evolving. And then, of course, new archetypes that we may be activating, heavily looking at progressive charts, right? Your progressed natal chart and where those planets have moved to. That tells us a lot about the current new archetypes that we're activating. So we're going to start out with Aries. Aries is so this is for Aries risings, okay? This is a particular story arc, okay? As all the rising signs are, it is a story, okay? Astrology is storytelling. So moving from the first house, excuse me, to the 12th house, it is a story arc, okay? Because as you progress through the houses, you are learning about different aspects of self. You are gaining different experiences. You are learning new things. You are developing new skills. You are also moving through different challenges. And then by the time we get to the 12th house, you know, we call that the house of self-undoing, the house of self-sabotage, the house of the subconscious. It's also the house of transcendence. It's also the house where you can discover things beyond the surface world, right? We're talking about kind of retrieving aspects of the soul. We're talking about connecting to something greater than ourselves. So it's a very transcendental house as well, whereas the first house is very narrow. It is me. Who am I? And the first house is ruled by Aries. And so Aries is kind of like the original OG, if you will. Aries is the beginning. It is the seed. It is the inception. It is the starting point. As a baby comes out of the cosmic womb, which is Pisces, and it enters the world for the first time, that is Aries. So Aries is like the original OG archetype, okay? Aries was probably the first archetype to develop in human consciousness, if you will. It is the essence of me, myself, I, right? The I am. That is Aries. We have to understand that we are an I, that we are an individual, that we are a human being, right? In order to begin the journey, right? Very much like how an infant is discovering that they are a self, right? That they are a little human that is now trying to learn how to navigate the world. That is Aries. So with Aries, so if you're an Aries rising, now again, you can look, I would suggest, looking at both Placidus and Holsheim, see what resonates for you. You can take them both into account, right? Because I think that they both matter. So as an Aries rising, right, the Aries rising charts are very interesting because whether it's Placidus or it's Holsheim, it won't matter as that much because the rulers of the 12 houses will be the same. Okay. It's the how in Placidus, the sign that begins the cusp of the house is the technical ruler, right? So even if, let's say, you're a 29 degrees Aries rising, right? So your first house only has 1 or 2 degrees of Aries energy and the rest is Taurus, your first house is still technically ruled by Aries, okay? So whether we're looking at Holsheim or we're looking at Placidus, that's how this setup is going to be. But for some of you, you might see that in Placidus charts, you have 2 signs occupying 1 house, right? And so in that case, we want to take Holsheim into consideration, which is the natural progression. So Aries would be your first house, Taurus would be your second, Gemini would be your third, Cancer would be your fourth, Leo would be your fifth, Virgo your sixth, Libra your seventh, Scorpio your 8th, Sagittarius 9th, Capricorn 10th, Aquarius 11th, Pisces 12th. Now, why this gives ancient energy, right? Aries gives ancient energy to me because, like I said, it's like the original OG archetype. It's the rawest, purest, it's the beginning, it's the start, it's the initial spark of anything. And that's very ancient. Like the primordial essence, if you will. But there is also kind of a strange dichotomy with Aries in that it's also very innocent, very naive in many ways because it is the baby, because it is the infant. So it's both primordial and instinctual and very ancient in that way, but also is kind of young and naive and a little bit innocent and a little bit unaware of the nuances of the world, right? And so Aries rising's charts are always interesting to me as a Libra rising. because the way that your houses are set up is that all of your houses are ruled by their natural rulers, right? Because Aries rules the first house. Taurus rules the second house. So the way that your story arc is set up is very traditional. It is, again, it's the original coded blueprint. All of the houses are going to be ruled by their natural ruler. So there is this sense of ease in an Aries rising chart. But there can also be the sense of like, again, with the naivety or the innocence that I'm speaking about, this very childlike, original spark and essence, is that there's not a lot of nuance to the story arc. Now, again, I am going to talk about how I think Aries is evolving. So if you're an Aries rising and you want to look at your ruling planet, which is Mars, so we'll talk about that. We want to look at how this is evolving, right? And what I mean by not a lot of nuance is, for instance, as a Libra rising, right? All of my houses, this will be for every Libra rising, all of my houses are ruled by the opposing sign. Everything is flipped. Everything is opposite. And so Libra risings we have a challenging time because all of our natural houses are ruled by the opposing sign. So it takes a lot of nuance, a lot of balance, a lot of introspection, a lot of learning about how to incorporate that opposing sign into that house, okay? Aries doesn't have that issue. Everything is clear cut, to the point, exactly as it's supposed to be, right? And so this gives Aries risings this very interesting archetype. So if you are an Aries rising, you might feel like life is just very straightforward for you. Like everything is as it is, if that makes sense. Aries doesn't really like complexity. Aries doesn't really like to try to like uncover all the onion layers. They like everything to simply be as it is. Very straightforward, very to the point, very clear cut. This is what is the archetype of Aries. There's no confusion, right? That's a Pisces thing. We'll get to that when we talk about Pisces rising. There's no confusion. There's no complexity. There's no mismatched energy. It's all very coherent. It's all and it's strong. And so I think one of the lessons of Aries risings, and if this is your main archetype, is you do have to learn a few things. So one of those things is going to be how to not go overboard with the energy, right? And this is something Aries risings might be a lifelong lesson of this archetype, because everything is clear cut, because everything is kind of cohesive in a way within the chart. It almost feels like everything is super strong, right? Everything is like super strong. There's a lot of energy and it's all flowing through these houses in its natural state. So what you do have to watch out for is doing too much. There's too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And so learning how to balance, learning restraint, learning where to reel things in, that is going to be key for the Aries archetype, right? So as an Aries rising, let's just talk about your story arc, okay? So the first thing to note is that your ruling planet is going to be Mars, okay? So wherever your Mars is located by sign and by house, this is your main energy. This is your main archetypal plot line, okay? It's all about you actioning in the world. It's all about your energy, your passion, your drive, your ambition. That is the main kind of plot line of your life, is what am I here to do? Right? Aries is also about embodiment, right? It is the being of what you are. And so a huge part of your story, in your story arc, is actually your character development, is developing your character knowing who you are and what you're here to do and executing it. And so with the Mars being your ruling planet, Mars, and this is just all the myth, lores, and legends, right? Mars rules aggression. Mars rules military, violence, conflict, but it also rules initiative, action, how we actually utilize our physical energy out into the world, right? It's also our energy type, how we move our body. It's how we get things done. It's our style of doing. That's all Mars, right? And so you want to develop the Mars. So things like being very active in life is going to be important for you, like really utilizing your body correctly, finding movements and workouts and different kinds of things that really develop the strength and the healthiness of your energy in your body. That's going to be very important, right? Having goals, having a path, having a direction is also very important for you. But with that Mars energy, this is also where you're going to have to learn how to deal with conflict. Okay. Now, some people may say that Aries are very confrontational and that they are very aggressive. I would say that that can be the case, but I would see that more with other placements of Mars versus just the Aries rising. And the reason being is because your 7th house is ruled by Libra. And this is important in the story arc, right? So you want to find the Mars. This is where you're going to experience conflict. This is where you are naturally going to have to overcome challenges. Okay. You're going to have to learn how to navigate, and you're going to have to learn not to fight fire with fire. This is where the other character development really comes in. So Mars is your ruling planet. This is what you need to utilize. This is what is going to be the basis of your plot line. Okay. 1st house, Aries. You have to develop a sense of self, autonomy, independence. You will spend a lot of time in life having to do things on your own because you have to. You have to develop that sense of self, self-reliance, independence to a certain extent, right? You have to develop the art of trusting your instincts, knowing when to act, knowing when not to act, knowing how to take action. Aries is bold, fearless. You want to really grasp that within yourself, right? It's about discovering the I am. Taurus ruling your 2nd house means that, if you just simply take action, if you follow your divine instincts, okay, and you act upon it, you trust yourself, you're confident, okay? You're willing to go out on a limb, you're willing to bet on yourself, you're willing to take those leaps of faith, okay? The 2nd house flows very naturally, okay? Taurus ruling the 2nd, just be consistent. Taurus is consistent, grounded, okay? They build it brick by brick, okay? They know when to slow down. They know when to enjoy what they've done, what they've created, all the energy output. They know how to stop and smell the roses. But in general, Tauruses are very good at manifesting. They're very good at receiving back what they've built. They're very good at the giving and receiving art, right? So your 2nd house is your sense of self-worth. It's your sense of how you develop resources and abundance and stability in life, okay? And that is where you start to develop your groundedness, knowing when to slow down, okay? Knowing when to just smell the roses and stop racing towards the finish line, okay? Treating yourself well, knowing your self-worth, okay? That is where the story arc and the character development starts to really come in. Now, I kind of sometimes look at, because I think the angular houses in the chart are really core to periods of life. So the first is the 1st house, right? That's the ascendant. The next is the IC, which lies at the base of the 4th house. And this has to do with the core of your inner self-development, like emotional regulation, what you love, what you care about, how you view yourself internally. And that also connects to childhood, the parents, the home life, right? Your lineage, your ancestry. That's where a lot of the core inner sense of self develops. Then the 7th house is going to be the next angular house. And that is the house of relationships. This is how we bond with others. This is how people gravitate towards us. This is how we collaborate and connect, and we form relationships with the outside world. We learn how to work with other people. We learn the art of balance and compromise and all these things. 10th house, the house of success, the house of coming into our own. Where it feels like all the effort and work and self-development that we have put in starts to accumulate into something, into success, achievement, fulfillment. And this is where we become kind of seen and recognized for what we have done and what we have built. It's our public reputation. It is how the world sees us, right? So I tend to kind of see it as like, the 7 years of life cycle, right? First 7 years might be houses 1 through 4. 7 through 14 would be houses 4 through 7. 14 through 21, houses 7 through 10. And then 21 through 28, houses 10 through 12. And this actually coincides with the first Saturn return. And so that's kind of how I view these archetypes here. The story of our life is by the first Saturn return, which tends to be around 27, 28, sometimes 29. We've kind of made it around the wheel for the first time. And then we enter the second round. And everybody knows once you start your Saturn return, you are not the same person when you end the Saturn return. Okay, that is the nature of the Saturn return. So we go around this wheel a lot of times, okay? So by the time that we are, developing, let's say, our first 7 years of life, we're going through the first house, the second house. What is mine? What is yours? What am I worth? How do I give and receive? Right? What is the nature of giving and receiving? We learn that at a young age. Third house there then is ruled by Gemini. This is the house of communication. This is when we first learn to talk and read and write. And it's a whole new world of learning, right? Because the first 2 houses are very much about instincts and the 5 senses. It's about observation. It's about trial and error. That's how we're learning in those houses. By the time we get to the 3rd house, we are learning from a mental state now, right? We are learning how our brain is working, that we are curious beings, that we can absorb information and log it and learn, right? And we can read and we can write and we can talk. And this opens up all new horizons here. So then that brings us to the 4th house, Cancer, ruled by Cancer. So Aries risings might have a really strong, I think, again, you can see the ties here, especially in these angular houses. The 4th house being ruled by Cancer, which is its natural state, has a really strong tie to the mother, has a really strong tie to family, to the home, to lineage, to ancestry. Okay, so Aries risings might feel a really strong bond with family. Now, again, this can change. This isn't a blanket generalization because it depends what planets you have where, right? So as you're looking at your chart, of course, you want to go to the ruler first, which is Mars, and really understand that. But then you have to see where the other planets are in your chart. This is your plot. Everybody's plot is totally unique, right? So like if you had Pluto in the 4th house, it's a little bit of a different vibe, right? So you've got to really understand your story, your plot here. But in general, Aries risings could feel very connected to their mothers, to their family, to their ancestry. And this kind of gives a feedback loop to the 1st house of them really having a sense of who they are. Maybe feeling very proud, very confident in who they are because they feel a deep sense of connection to their lineage, to where they come from, right? Your 5th house ruled by Leo. You'll see a lot of Aries risings are performers, songwriters, actors, actresses, people that are famous. Because that fifth house being ruled by Leo, you have the very strong creative energy, right? The fifth house is very sacral. It's about children. It's about play. It's about creativity. It's about self-expression, right? We also tend to see the fifth house and Leo energy, also the 11th house, that opposite axis. The fame energy, being seen, being celebrated, being well known. So a lot of Aries risings, right? The thing about Aries risings, and I'll get to this as I give you some examples of Aries risings chart, is that you have this ability to be very entrepreneurial because every house is strong. Every house is strong because it's all ruled by its natural ruler, meaning kind of whatever house you dive into. And again, it could depend on what planets you have where. It's like you could be successful in it because the energy is unimpeded. You know what I mean? It's really interesting. So, and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has just happened in Aries. So for my Aries risings, this could be in your 12th or 1st house, depending, right? In Placidus, could also maybe be in your 2nd house. In whole sign, it's going to be in your 1st house regardless. So you're like entering a new era. And I think the old archetype of Aries, as I said, it's primordial, it's instinctual, it's ancient, it's the warrior. And when we think, as we're going through these houses, you can see why, right? There's a natural strength that the Aries energy has because its blueprint is unimpeded. It's not complex. There's no interference. It's strong. The energy flows. It's powerful. And so we get the Aries warrior archetype. And of course, Mars as its ruler, right? But I actually would like to, as we're saying these archetypes are evolving. So I do think that all the archetypes are coming into balance with their sister sign. So Libra. Libra is the peacemaker, the judge, the karmic balance of life. And Aries is the warrior energy, the go-getter, the instigator, right? Those two are coming into balance. And I really do feel that the new archetype of Aries, the evolved archetype of Aries, is very entrepreneurial. It's like you can do whatever you want to do, essentially. And I think every sign can. This isn't just for Aries. We are in the Aries era, so everybody can lean into that energy. But Aries rising specifically are going to have this talent. Your core archetype is that you can do whatever you want to do. Because any house you look at is strengthened by the fact that it's in domicile, right? So, looking at that, it's like we see why a lot of Aries risings were able to do really powerful, great things, right? As we've made it through like the 5th house, 6th house, Virgo. Okay, ruled by Virgo, natural house of Virgo. There's a strong strength in discipline, work ethic, day-to-day life. Feels like you are able to manage it efficiently. Health and wellness. Again, some of these interpretations will change based on where you have planets, especially if they are afflicted planets, right? Again, if I were to have like Saturn in the 6th, right, or Neptune in the 6th, it's going to change the dynamic. I'm just talking straight house rulership. Great work ethic, great discipline, great structure to life. 7th house, ruled by Libra. It's natural sign, it's natural state. Here we reach another angular house. Okay, so after we develop the sense of who we are and the autonomy, the individuality, the independence, 4th house, we know where we come from. We have a strong bond to our lineage, to our past, to our ancestors. There's a rootedness there. The 7th house in Libra is that you are very good at building partnerships with other people and working with other people. people like to work with a Libra 7th house because it carries that natural sense of fairness, reasonableness, equal energy exchange, balance, right? You can also be quite a hopeless romantic, right? 7th house Libra is like, you love partnerships. You love relationships. You love to get along with others. You love harmony. And it can lead to a little bit of that, that hopeless romantic, energy. 8th house of Scorpio, though, this is the only part of the chart where that, I think, there is an intensity to that. Your core inner transformations are intense and deep. You have to face a lot of things head on in that 8th house, ruled by Scorpio naturally, right? A lot of deaths and rebirths. You can face, again, Aries energy can be too much, too fast, too overboard. 8th house, you might see it manifesting. Addiction, depression, facing those inner demons, if you will, right? Again, all these houses are strong and unimpeded because they're in their natural rulership. But as I said, it can also be too much of a good thing as a bad thing. So any one of these houses can be too strong and there's too much energy and there's no balance. And so that is where problems can occur, right? 9th house of Sag, big ideals. I think a grand optimism about life and really lucky in many ways. And also being really easy to connect with people of all walks of life, kind of loving the adventure of life. 10th house Capricorn can be very successful because the 10th house is in its natural rulership. You have the ability to leave a legacy, to bring a lot of success, to have a natural authority. Again, angular house. People are looking to you as an authority on something. People are seeing you as an accomplished, successful person. You might rise easily into places of power or being able to have a seat at the table. You kind of rise easily into leadership positions, right? Into authority positions. 11th house Aquarius, you have a way of connecting with the world and connecting with humanity. People see you as a rebel, someone interesting, someone who's in it for the people in a lot of ways, and could be a very revolutionary energy where you bring cultural revolutions, you bring things to the world that change the dynamic, that change the game. A big trendsetter, seen as somebody who's really unique. 12th house Pisces, another one that's a little, because the 12th house is what we cannot see about ourselves, right? So as you're moving through this story arc of your life, you're basically, every house is getting developed strongly. That's the theme of Aries rising. Everything is powerful. Everything is maybe even too much or overwhelming in many senses because, and especially wherever you have your Mars, for instance, your ruling planet, there's going to be a lot of action there. A lot of action, a lot of activity. Life can feel overwhelming. Life can feel like it's always big. Like every area of your life is always big, right? And I think, again, that's the Aries archetype. It's like, it's strong, it's assertive, it's always go time. It's always big, it's always loud, right? And then there's also that innocence, right? Of having to learn, right? That sometimes we have to slow down. And that sometimes it's too much, and that sometimes you need balance, and you have to learn restraint, and that it's not out of a punishment, it's just out of needing to harness that extremely potent energy in the right ways, right? And the 12th house is what we cannot see about ourselves. So that subconscious house being in Pisces is, there's a lot that you might not be able to see about yourself that you have to uncover. The 12th house requires a deep dive. It's a deep dive into your consciousness, your psyche. There's a soul excavation in the 12th house. And so Aries risings can really be very spiritual and kind of have this otherworldly sense about them. But I think as an Aries rising, you might feel like you don't even quite understand yourself. You know, you have this way of exerting energy externally really well. But when it comes to kind of unraveling your inner self or your spiritual nature, uncovering unconscious wounds, uncovering unconscious parts of self, that might feel very foggy to you. It might take a while to really delve into kind of the the solitude and the intuition of Pisces in the 12th house, to remember that you also have this soul aspect, and it's not just about what you do. It's not just about how you're perceived in the outer world. It's not just about the actions you take. It's also about your sense of having coherence with your intuition, right? And having divine action versus impulsive action, right? And so you also have this capability of really transcending in a very spiritual way. But again, it takes rounds around the wheel, right? So just to give you guys some examples of the archetypal Aries, right, are some Aries rising individuals. And I have to pick always like celebrity people because, you know, we have to know some things about them for it to make sense. So first Aries rising is Shaquille O'Neal, right? Most famous for being a basketball player and being extremely big, right? Like just buff, tall. He was 7'1". He's a monster of a human, right? He's got this strength and this force and this like presence about him, right? And in many ways that can be very Aries. Like I said, it's big. It's big, it's loud. It's like right there in your face where you can't miss it. Now he's also a 25-degree Aries rising ascendant, which is also an Aries degree. So he's just got this boldness. It's just out there, right? Now we want to look, he is actually a great, you know, I think all these examples are really great of the entrepreneurial aspect of Aries. The idea that they can do whatever they want to do. So his Mars, which is his ruling planet, is in Taurus in the first house. Okay? Taurus is like a tree. It's sturdy. It's strong. Tauruses are represented, right, by the bull with the horns. There's a power. There's a strength. Taurus rules the earth. It rules builders. It rules immovable rocks, right? A lot of Tauruses, like you might look at Taurus risings or people with heavy Taurus placements, tend to be tall. Even if they're not tall, they have this kind of presence of being tall, right? There is this really raw kind of body strength with Taurus, and that's what he's known for. Right? So again, you can see his Mars and Taurus in his first house of self is what he's known for. This is where all the energy went. Being a basketball player, using that strength, using that height, being a kind of very famous pillar in sports. Okay? You can see easily that his ruling archetype was very much out there. Okay? He also had Venus at 29 degrees Aries in his first house. Okay, so that's the warrior energy, the intensity, right? He is also known for his big, bold kind of personality, the way he expresses himself. Okay, now a lot of other things that I saw in this chart were examples of the ease of an Aries rising chart, right? And so, you know, Shaq did a lot of other things. He kind of was able to branch out, not just from being like a famous sports player, right? But then he was also like delved into like rapping and acting and book writing. He formed a lot of companies. He did a lot of like charity philanthropic stuff. Like now he's a sportscaster. Like he's done like all these different things, and you will see certain people like that who are able to kind of dabble in lots of different things, and that gave me very Aries rising energy, right? Because he also had Mercury in Aries and Chiron in Aries, but in his 12th house. And so again, there was kind of these hidden gifts that he had, right? again, 12th house is hidden. So he kind of had these hidden gifts, these hidden parts of self that didn't emerge until after he finished off his very first house energy, which was being seen as the sports star, this big, tall, very strong, known for his kind of brute force sports player. Now, the philanthropy stuff, he has this North Node in Aquarius, right? Which is to kind of focus on the collective, to make an impact on the world, to do something for humanity. It's in his 10th house, where we are seen, where we are recognized, where we are most kind of, given the accolades or the recognition for work that we've done. So his North Node there in Aquarius in the 10th house has also kind of brought him to be seen in this light of a lot of different things he's done philanthropically or to just help people in general, right? Again, he can dabble in all these things because all these houses are strong. We also will see a lot with Aries risings. Again, I'm looking at Placidus charts because that's how I usually do it, is they often have Scorpio energy that can fall into the 7th house, right? Because of the Placidus nature, it's not evenly based houses. But even if we were to look at whole sign, right? When they, especially these Aries risings, when they have Scorpio placements, whether it falls in the 7th or the 8th house, those tend to be also very prominent things we know about this person, right? Because like as I told you, all the houses are loud. Even though Scorpio tends to be very private, secret, this is a really private, raw area of our life, things we don't really share with others, because the nature of this Aries rising energy is that all of the houses are loud. All of the houses are in your face. So something he's also known for was, right, cheating on his wife, getting divorced. He often does interviews where he talks about how much he regrets it, how it's the biggest regret of his life. Moon in Scorpio, 7th house. Okay. Scorpio can be known as betrayal, cheating, etc. And he has his moon in the 7th house, marriage. So again, you can do whatever you want. You have this ability to really tap in and dabble into any of your houses because there's a strength there. You will want to lean into the Mars one for sure. But also realizing that everything in your chart will be obvious to everybody. It will be there. There's no subtlety, there's no secrets, there's no hidden energy, okay? So you also have to realize that as an Aries archetype, right? And this entrepreneurial energy is everyone will see everything about you and what you do. Everything you do will be very focused on, upfront, seen. And so you have to be aware of that as well, right? So I think there's a level of integrity here that has to be had. Another great example, James Dean. I feel like he just sums up that phrase, live fast, die young, right? Like he died, I think he was like 24 or 25. He was also an Aries rising. Okay. He was a 12 degree Aries rising, which is a Pisces degree. And so this kind of gives us the enigma that was James Dean, right? There's always this kind of like mystique around him. Obviously he was very good looking. He kind of had a really quick rise to fame and like did a bunch of movies, became super kind of famous and well known, but there was always this like mystique around him. Like he's kind of an enigmatic character, right? And I think that has to do with the 12 degrees, the Pisces degree of this Aries rising. But he also had Uranus in Aries, the North Node in Aries, in the 1st house. Okay, Uranus in Aries is very impulsive and erratic, right? And we know that he died in a car crash, that he was very into racing cars and kind of doing, again, live fast, die young. Like he was very much like living recklessly, fast-paced, go-getter type. And that Uranus energy is something to be very careful with if you do have Uranus in Aries anywhere. And it was conjunct his North Node in Aries. Which was at 17 degrees, a Leo degree. Again, being very seen, visible, known, famous. So his North Node at a Leo degree in Aries, first house, it was conjunct his Uranus, right? Quick rise to fame. He made a huge impact, I think, on the culture, on the Hollywood scene, and then that was it. He died. So everything about his life was fast and quick, and then out. This lines up with his chart, right? And this is one of the other archetypes of Aries. Not to say about dying, but I just mean everything is quick, fast, extreme, heightened. So this is my point, is that as an Aries rising, you also have to understand, like for instance, in this James Dean story, he didn't know when to slow down. He didn't know when to stop. Restraint, pacing. Now, of course, divine events happen. We all are going to go when we're going to go. So not to say that, he did something wrong. It's just another example, though, of Aries rising blueprint. Is there's going to be lessons about where you have to stop, where you have to have restraint, where you can't just go at this rapid fire pace, right? Now his Mars, his ruling planet, 2 degrees Leo in the 5th house. 2 degrees is a Taurus degree, right? So Taurus, money, resources, also physical things we own, right? Physical things we own as Taurus. He owned flashy cars. He loved to race them, right? Mars in Leo 5th house is very fiery. Again, he was very good looking. Leo tends to have that energy, and he got very famous very quickly. And he was known for these things, right? Also had Moon in Scorpio in the 7th house, and there was always a lot of discussions about his relationships and who he was dating and who he was with, and a lot of rumors and gossip about that. Again, you will see every part of your house, everywhere your planets are transiting in an Aries rising chart, is loud. Everyone's going to know. Everyone's going to focus on everything. So that is just the nature of the game, right? Another great example is John Lennon. So he was also an Aries rising, but at 19 degrees, a Libra degree. What was he most known for? 2 things, actually. He was most known for his relationship with Yoko Ono, right? It was like this beautiful love story. Everyone was kind of like obsessed with them as a couple. And he was a huge peace activist. Libra degree, Aries rising. Now, he also had a lot of planets in his 1st house, but they were all in Taurus. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, all in Taurus. Taurus does rule the throat. What is he known for? Singing, being in the Beatles, right? I think, yeah. I hope that's right. He's known for that, right? So that kind of all carried into his 1st house in terms of, what he's seen for with that Aries rising energy. But his ruling planet Mars, 2 degrees Libra. 2 degrees Taurus degree. Same as James Dean had, 2 degrees Leo. What was he known for? Of course, he had it in Leo, the 5th house, very loud, his acting, his fame. But 2 degrees as a Taurus degree is also about looks, okay? It's about good-looking attractiveness, okay? And it's also about partnerships, the 2, union. What was John Lennon most known for? It was the peace. It was his relationships. It was his sense of harmony. That's what he was singing about. That was what his and Yoko Ono's activism was about. So he had Mars at 2 degrees Libra in the 6th house, where he had a massive stellium. Sun in Libra, 6th house. Venus in Virgo, 6th house. Neptune in Virgo, 6th house. North Node in Libra, 6th house. Peace activist. That is what he was doing. Those were the things he was most known for. Again, it's very obvious, right? Now let's take a look at a final example, a feminine example. Stevie Nicks, Aries rising 18 degrees. That is a Virgo degree, also known as the Oppenheimer degree. There can be some like things with the 18th degree that people view as negative. It's known as the diabolical degree. I think because and the reason they named it the Oppenheimer degree was because Oppenheimer happened to have a lot of 18 degrees in his chart, and obviously he created nuclear weapons. So it's known as the diabolical degree. Now, I think because 18 degrees is Virgo, it's just about perfection, and it's about precision. And of course, precision and perfection can be used in a horrible way, but also it is the degree of alchemy. It's the degree of like literally alchemizing and making things better and more perfect than they are. I think Stevie Nicks really nails that as an Aries rising. She also had her North Node in Taurus in the first house. So again, her destiny, singing, the throat, right, etc. Very prevalent in the first house. Now, her ruling planet Mars is at 3 degrees Virgo in the 5th house. 5th house is creativity, singing, performing, fame. 3 degrees is a Gemini degree. Gemini rules verbal expression, communication. Again, she was known for her lyric writing, her song singing, her performing. Again, it's always very obvious in an Aries rising chart. It all makes sense. She also had Saturn and Leo in her 5th house. She also had Pluto in Leo in her 5th house. So again, everything about the Aries charts are obvious in your face and very simple, right? Mars at 3 degrees Virgo in the 5th. She was also a style icon. Like she was known and was like revolutionized style, which 5th house can be style. Also Virgo is that perfection. Like she was a trendsetter. She perfected her very well-known style evolution and being a style icon. Also, what was she most known for? Public breakup with the band member. Very messy breakup, albums written about it, drama within the band. That is what Pluto and Leo in the 5th house will do. Also Saturn and Leo, 5th house, because the 5th house is not only that house of creativity and being seen and self-expression, it also tends to be our attraction. So it's like where we fall in love with other people. The 7th house is where we make it a long-term relationship, but the 5th house is that kind of dating, falling in love, romance stories, etc. So that's what was very obvious and in everyone's face in that 5th house. She also had Chiron and Scorpio in the 7th. Betrayals in relationships. Also, she was very, open about struggles with addiction due to depression and due to these breakups and due to relationship issues. That is very Chiron and Scorpio 7th house. So again, this is what I love about Aries rising's charts, is that they can do anything. And so that is something I feel for Aries archetypes to really lean into, is to really look at your Mars, but also, as you can see with the examples that I gave, each one of these examples totally lived up to their Mars energy. Their ruling archetype was super strong. It's very obvious. It all makes sense. You look at their chart, you're like, yep, exactly that, right? Now, a lot of these examples also had stelliums in other houses. Might not be the house of their Mars. A lot of them had first house stelliums, which is their Aries house, so that's always interesting. But you might have a stellium, like for instance, John Lennon, right? Like he did have a stellium in the same house as his Mars. So that put a big added emphasis on that. But like for instance, Shaquille O'Neal, like he had multiple first house planets amplifying that Aries rising, but he also had a stellium in his 12th house. Very unseen, very like no one really knows who he is and what he's about. And then all of a sudden he starts doing all these things like acting and writing and being a rapper and being a news broadcaster and like writing a book and doing this like philanthropy. Like everyone's like, whoa, pulling a lot of things out of the hat there, but that's his 12th house stellium. There's a lot about him people don't really know. And maybe he had to go through a process of self-discovery for that, right? So I would look at where you have a stellium, if you have a stellium, and of course your Mars house. And just really leaning into getting out of the warrior energy of Mars. It's not that we don't need that archetype anymore. We definitely need a balance between the peacemaker and the warrior, but we also need this energy of Aries, which is just so transparent and straightforward. So if this is you, it's like everything you do in life, you're going to have to do it cleanly, because it will be out there for everybody to see. It will just be very obvious. But at the same time, what I love about this is the transparency, the honesty is really raw and refreshing with an Aries rising archetype. So it doesn't matter if you fuck up. It doesn't matter if everything doesn't go perfect. You are the living, breathing, walking example of just like being full throttle in life and owning every part of your chart and owning every part of yourself. And there's a very raw, open, honest transparentness to that I think is very important for the world. Just being raw, and being entrepreneurial and knowing that you can dabble into, honestly, any house you want. I think that is the new and evolving archetype of Aries. So yeah, any Aries risings or anybody else, if you are interested in kind of looking at your core archetypes, the evolution of your archetypes, or the new archetypes that you might have coming in, I have both of those sessions up on the website. So love you guys, and I'll be back soon with the Taurus rising video.